The recording device in Sarah Miller's pocket was still warm from her sweaty palm when Christopher Wagner grabbed the microphone. "Before our valedictorian wannabe starts her little speech," he announced to 800 people in the Oakwood High Auditorium, his quarterback smile gleaming under the stage lights. "I think everyone should know the truth about Sarah Miller. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand why a teenage girl stood frozen on that stage, watching her carefully prepared Honor Society speech crumble in her trembling hands, you need to know what happened in the 37 days leading up to that moment. You need to know about the brother who taught her that sometimes the most dangerous truths hide behind the brightest smiles. It started with a simple no. Sarah was reorganizing the journalism room's equipment closet, a thankless job she'd volunteered for because empty rooms didn't whisper about her when Christopher Wagner appeared in the doorway. 6'2" of hereditary privilege wrapped in a Letterman jacket, holding a corsage box like it was her winning lottery ticket. "So, prom," he said, not asked. "My dad already reserved the country club limo. You'll wear blue, it photographs better with my eyes." Sarah's hands never stopped sorting camera lenses. "Thank you. But no. And let me know in the comments. Where in the world are you watching from? We love seeing how far these stories travel. Whether you're here for the action, the heart, or both, thank you for being part of this mission." The silence stretched like a rubber band about to snap. Nobody said no to Christopher Wagner. Not the principal's son, not the quarterback who'd led Oakwood to state championships, not the boy whose father controlled every student's academic future with a keystroke. "Excuse me." His voice had that dangerous quality her brother Daniel used to warn her about the calm before someone showed you who they really were. "I said no, thank you." Sarah turned to face him, keeping the equipment shelf between them. "I'm sure you'll find someone else who'd love to go." Christopher's jaw worked like he was chewing glass. "You think you're too good for me? Some nobody whose claim to fame is a dead cop brother." The words hit exactly where he'd aimed them. Sarah's hand instinctively moved to her pocket, where Daniel's last gift rested, a recording device no bigger than a button. "For my future journalist," he'd said 3 days before the drug bust went wrong. "Sometimes the only witness to truth is technology." "I think we're done here," Sarah managed, her voice steady despite the grief clawing at her throat. Christopher smiled, then the kind of smile that made her understand why Daniel always said the most dangerous criminals were the ones who looked like salvation. "No, Sarah. We're just getting started." He was right. The campaign began subtly. The way cancer begins, a few cells gone wrong, that nobody notices until it's spreading everywhere. First came the whispers in hallways that stopped when she approached. Then her usual lunch table became mysteriously full every day. Lab partners suddenly had other commitments. Group project members forgot to include her in planning sessions. "Maybe you're being paranoid," her mother suggested over dinner. Exhaustion from double shifts at the hospital making her look older than her 48 years. High school is hard for everyone. But Daniel had taught Sarah the difference between paranoia and pattern recognition. "Watch for escalation," he'd told her once, teaching her to analyze crime scenes from his textbooks. Bad actors always escalate when they don't get the reaction they want. The escalation came during AP chemistry. Sarah arrived to find her lab station contaminated with a sticky substance that reeked of rotten eggs. Her notebook containing a month of meticulous observations was soaked through. On the board, someone had written, "Even her brother didn't want to stick around," in neat block letters. Mrs. Patterson barely glanced up from her desk. "Clean it up quickly, Miss Miller. We have important work today." That's when Sarah understood Christopher wasn't just popular. He was protected. She started recording everything after that. Every accidental shoulder check in the hallway. Every mysteriously deleted file from her school cloud storage. Every time her combination lock was found hanging open. Her belongings scattered. The device in her pocket became her constant companion, a digital witness to what nobody wanted to see. "You document everything," Daniel's voice echoed in her memory. "Patterns tell stories that single incidents can't." The pattern revealed itself on a Tuesday afternoon when she overheard Christopher in the empty cafeteria. His voice carrying through the serving window. "Told you. Marcus needs at least a 90 on the calculus final or he loses his scholarship. I don't care how you get the answers. Just make it happen." "But if we get caught," another voice, nervous. "We won't. My dad makes sure the testing protocols have holes. Why do you think Oakwood's test scores keep rising? You think these idiots suddenly got smarter?" Sarah pressed herself against the wall, her finger finding the record button by muscle memory. "What about the Turner kid? He's threatening to talk." Christopher laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Show him the photos again. Remind him his little sister goes to school here too. Amazing what people do at parties when they think nobody's watching." The recording device felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. This wasn't just bullying anymore. This was something Daniel would have built a case around. Something that would have made him work 18-hour days until he had enough evidence to bring the whole thing down. But Daniel was gone. And Sarah was just a 17-year-old girl whose guidance counselor had started suggesting she consider less competitive colleges because her teacher recommendations were mysteriously lukewarm despite her straight A's. She started investigating the way Daniel taught her carefully, methodically, assuming everyone was watching. She used the journalism room computers to research grade distributions, noting suspicious patterns in test scores. She tracked which students suddenly improved in subjects where Christopher's friends were TAs. She documented financial inconsistencies in club fundraisers Christopher managed. Every piece of evidence went into an encrypted folder on a cloud service Christopher didn't know existed. Protected by security protocols Daniel had helped her establish. "Always have backups of your backups," he'd said, "and never let them know how much you know until you're ready to use it." And the homecoming dance was when Christopher realized she wasn't breaking. Sarah hadn't planned to attend, but the journalism club needed a photographer, and hiding had started to feel like surrender. She stationed herself behind her camera, using the lens as a shield between herself and the grinding mass of teenage desperation disguised as celebration. "Still playing with your little toys?" Christopher materialized beside her. His date, a sophomore who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else, hanging off his arm like an accessory. "How's that dead brother of yours still dead?" Sarah kept shooting, the camera's click punctuating her words. "How's your college application still dependent on Daddy's connections?" His face flushed purple in the disco lights. "You have no idea who you're messing with." "Actually, I do." She lowered the camera, meeting his eyes directly for the first time since the journalism room. "Marcus Chen, Ashley Rodriguez, Tyler Turner. Should I continue?" The names of students he'd been discussing hung between them like loaded weapons. Christopher's date tried to pull him away, but he shook her off, leaning close enough that Sarah could smell the vodka he'd snuck into his Sprite. "You're playing a dangerous game, Miller." "I learned from the best." Her hand found the recording device automatically. "My brother taught me that the truth doesn't need to hide in shadows. Only lies do that." That night, her mother's car tires were slashed. All four, with surgical precision. The security cameras that should have caught the vandal mysteriously malfunctioned during that exact hour. The message was clear: I can reach you anywhere. But Sarah had grown up in a house where threats were breakfast conversation, where Daniel would analyze criminal psychology over cereal. She knew fear was just another form of control, and control only worked if you gave it permission. She started building her case with the patience of someone who'd watched her brother prepare for trial. Every recorded conversation was transcribed and cross-referenced. Every suspicious grade change was documented with screenshots. Every financial discrepancy in Christopher's organizations was traced and verified. The web emerged slowly, like a photograph developing in darkness. Christopher wasn't just bullying random students, he was running a sophisticated operation. Test answers sold to desperate students. Blackmail material gathered at parties to ensure silence. Grade modifications for those who could pay. All of it funneling money into offshore accounts that would make his Harvard application shine with entrepreneurial spirit. And floating above it all, like a spider content to let others dirty their hands in the web, Principal Wagner, whose signature appeared on every altered transcript, whose password overrode every system flag, whose blind eye was paid for in rising test scores that brought state funding and personal bonuses. If this reminds you of someone who made your life hell, while everyone in power looked the other way, you're not alone. Some of us carry those scars forever, wondering why nobody stopped them when the signs were so clear. Sarah might have kept gathering evidence forever, building an airtight case the way Daniel would have, if Christopher hadn't made it personal. Again. The envelope appeared in her locker on a Thursday morning, slipped through the vents like poison gas, inside a photo of Daniel at his funeral, defaced with red marker. "Join him," scrawled across his dress uniform. Sarah's hands shook as she held the desecration of her brother's memory. Around her, students flowed through the hallway like water around a stone, careful not to see, not to stop, not to become the next target. That's when Jessica Chen appeared at her elbow, the school's IT administrator who had been Daniel's classmate, who'd attended his funeral, who'd watched Sarah grow up in the shadow of her brother's brightness. "My office," Jessica said quietly. "Now." The IT office smelled like burned coffee and electronic despair. Jessica locked the door behind them, pulled down the blinds, and turned on white noise generators Sarah hadn't even known existed. "I know what you're doing," Jessica said without preamble. "The digital footprints you're leaving, I'm the one cleaning them up so Christopher doesn't find them." Sarah's hand moved instinctively to her recording device, but Jessica shook her head. "I'm not your enemy. Daniel was—" She paused, choosing words carefully. "He helped me once, with a situation, never asked for anything in return, never told anyone. Just said, that's what good cops do, protect people who can't protect themselves. Why are you telling me this?" Jessica pulled up multiple screens on her computer, each showing different aspects of Oakwood's network. "Because you're right about what's happening, but you're wrong about the scope. This isn't just Christopher and his father, look." The data flowed like a digital waterfall, communications between schools, coordinated test score manipulations, an entire market for academic fraud that stretched across the district. Christopher was just middle management in a corporation of corruption. "The opening ceremony," Jessica continued, highlighting calendar entries. "Principal Wagner is announcing the Honor Society inductees. You're giving a speech." "Right." Sarah nodded, still processing the magnitude of what she was seeing. "Christopher's planning something. I've seen the communications coded, but not well. He's going to humiliate you in front of everyone. make you look unstable, unreliable, destroy your credibility before you can expose them. Then I won't go. No. Jessica's eyes blazed with something Sarah recognized, the same fire Daniel had when working a case that mattered. You go. You stand on that stage. And when he tries to destroy you, you be ready. Because I'll make sure every piece of evidence you've collected gets delivered to the right people at exactly the right moment. Why would you risk? Because Daniel would have. Because somebody has to. Because I'm tired of watching kids like you pay the price for adults' ambition. Jessica handed her a USB drive. Everything you've collected, plus what I've found, triple encrypted. The ceremony is in 10 days. Be ready. Sarah spent those 10 days the way Daniel had taught her to prepare for confrontation methodically, thoroughly, expecting everything to go wrong. She practiced her Honor Society speech until she could recite it through tears. She backed up her evidence to servers in 3 different states. She wrote letters to be sent if something happened to her, documenting everything with the precision of someone who'd learned that truth needed to be bulletproof to pierce privilege. Her mother noticed the change. You're like Daniel before a big case. Focused. Scary, focused. He taught me well. He taught you to fight. I hope he also taught you when to walk away. But walking away felt like betrayal of Daniel's memory. Of every student suffering in silence. Of the girl she'd been before grief carved her hollow and purpose filled her back up. The morning of the ceremony dawned crisp and clear. The kind of October day that made Oakwood look like a college brochure. Sarah dressed carefully, Daniel's saint. Christopher medal tucked under her collar, the recording device secured in her pocket. Her Honor Society speech folded precisely in her jacket. The auditorium filled with the nervous energy of parents pretending their children's achievements were their own. Sarah stood backstage with the other honorees, watching Christopher work the crowd in his tailored suit, every inch the principal's perfect son. He caught her watching and winked. The gesture held all the malice of their past weeks compressed into a single moment. Honor Society inductees, please take your positions. Mrs. Henderson called out. Sarah walked onto the stage, the weight of 800 eyes following her movement. In the front row, her mother sat beside an empty chair, the one they always left for Daniel, even though ghosts didn't need seats to haunt you. Principal Wagner took the podium, his voice booming with artificial pride. Welcome to Oakwood High's annual opening ceremony. Today, we celebrate excellence, integrity, and the bright futures ahead of our exceptional students. Sarah almost laughed at the irony. Behind Wagner, Christopher lounged in his chair like a king surveying his kingdom, waiting for his moment to strike. The ceremony proceeded with mechanical precision, awards announced. Achievements applauded. The mythology of meritocracy performed for an eager audience. Sarah's turn approached like a storm system on radar, inevitable and destructive. And now, Principal Wagner announced, our newest Honor Society inductee, Sarah Miller, will share a few words about what academic excellence means to her. Sarah stood, her legs steady despite the earthquake in her chest. She'd made it 3 steps toward the podium when Christopher rose from his chair. Actually, Principal Wagner, Dad, I think everyone should know something about Miss Miller before she speaks. The auditorium fell silent. This wasn't part of the program. Parents shifted uncomfortably, sensing drama the way animals sense earthquakes. Christopher took the microphone from his father's unresisting hand, his smile sharp enough to draw blood. You see, Sarah Miller likes to think she's special. Honor Society, straight A's, following in her heroic brother's footsteps. Sarah froze, her speech clutched in suddenly numb fingers. "But what you don't know," Christopher continued, prowling the stage like a predator circling wounded prey, "is that Sarah has been stalking me for weeks, recording private conversations, making wild accusations, all because I had the audacity to turn down her prom invitation last year." The lie landed like a bomb. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Sarah saw her mother's face cycle through confusion, concern, and growing anger. "She's been spreading rumors about a supposed cheating ring." Christopher laughed, the sound echoing off the auditorium walls. "Can you imagine her grades start slipping because she's obsessed with her conspiracy theories, and suddenly everyone else is cheating?" "That's not," Sarah started, but Christopher rolled over her words. "She even accused me of blackmail. Me, like I need to blackmail anyone when I've got everything I could want." He pulled out his phone, projecting images onto the screen behind them. Photos of Sarah in the journalism room, in the computer lab, always alone, always watching. "Look at these. She's been following me, photographing me. It's honestly concerning." The images were real, but edited, context stripped away like skin from bone. Sarah in the background of Christopher's activities, made to look like stalking when she'd simply been existing in the same space he'd invaded. And the saddest part, Christopher's voice dropped to fake sympathy. She's been telling people her dead brother talks to her, gives her advice, teaches her to investigate. He shook his head theatrically. "I think we all know grief can break people, make them see things that aren't there, create villains where there are none." Sarah's hand found the recording device in her pocket. But what good would it do now? Christopher had preempted her, painted her as unstable, unreliable. Who would believe her evidence when he'd already destroyed her credibility? So before Sarah Miller stands up here and spins whatever fantasy she's prepared, Christopher concluded, handing the microphone back to his stunned father, "I thought everyone should know they're listening to a disturbed girl who can't accept that her brother is gone and the world has moved on without her." He sat back down to scattered, uncomfortable applause from those who didn't know what else to do. The auditorium felt like a held breath, waiting for something to break the suffocating tension. Principal Wagner cleared his throat. "Well, thank you for that concern, Christopher. Miss Miller, would you still like to—" Laura stood at the podium, 800 faces watching her with expressions ranging from pity to suspicion to cruel amusement. Her prepared speech about academic excellence and integrity crumbled in her hands like ash. The recording device burned in her pocket. The evidence waited on servers across the country. Jessica's promise echoed in her memory. But right now, at this moment, she was just a 17-year-old girl standing alone on a stage, labeled unstable by the very person who'd driven her to the edge. The ceremony that was supposed to celebrate her achievements had become her public execution. Sarah gripped the edges of the podium, her knuckles white against the dark wood. The silence in the auditorium had weight, pressing down on her shoulders like the world's judgment. 800 people waited for her to crumble, to prove Christopher right with tears or stammered denials. Instead, she thought of Daniel, not the ghost Christopher had mockingly invented, but the real Daniel who'd taught her that sometimes the hardest battles were fought in courtrooms of public opinion. Evidence is just data until you make people care about it, he'd said once, reviewing testimony. Truth needs a human face. Sarah raised her head, finding her mother's eyes in the front row. What she saw there wasn't disappointment or confusion, it was recognition. The same look she'd worn when Daniel faced down corruption in his own department, knowing it would cost him everything. "Thank you, Christopher," Sarah said, her voice carrying clear and steady through the microphone. "You've just demonstrated exactly why I need to give this speech." A ripple of surprise went through the crowd. This wasn't the reaction of someone unstable or desperate. "You're right about one thing," she continued, pulling the recording device from her pocket and setting it deliberately on the podium where everyone could see it. "I have been recording, documenting, investigating, just like my brother taught me to do when faced with systematic abuse of power." Christopher half rose from his chair, but his father's hand on his shoulder forced him back down. Principal Wagner's face had gone the color of spoiled milk. "You see," Sarah said, addressing the audience now, parents who'd come expecting celebration and finding scandal instead. "When someone tells you that your brother didn't want to stick around, when they write it on classroom boards and whisper it in hallways, you start to wonder why they're so invested in your pain." She pulled out her phone, fingers steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. "When they slash your mother's tires, hack your school accounts, and coordinate a campaign to destroy your academic career, you start to recognize patterns." "She's lying," Christopher burst out, but his voice cracked on the word, teenager showing through the polished facade. "Am I?" Sarah touched her phone screen, and Jessica's preparation paid off. The auditorium's main display, usually reserved for graduation slides and pep rally videos, flickered to life. "Then explain this." The first audio clip played. Christopher's voice filling the space. "Told you. Marcus needs at least a 90 on the calculus final, or he loses his scholarship. I don't care how you get the answers. Just make it happen." Parents straightened in their seats. Teachers exchanged alarmed glances. Christopher's face cycled through emotions like a slot machine shock. Rage. Calculation. "That's edited," he shouted. "She made that up, Dad. Tell them." But Sarah was already playing the next clip. Video this time. Timestamp clearly visible. Christopher in the empty cafeteria, discussing the Turner kid, mentioning the photos, threatening a student's little sister, the admissions about test protocols, the casual cruelty of someone who'd never faced consequences. "Fake," Christopher insisted, but his voice had lost its conviction. Around him, his carefully cultivated allies began creating distance, their chairs scraping as they leaned away from contamination. Sarah let the silence stretch after the video ended, letting the implications sink in. Then she turned to Principal Wagner, whose face resembled a wax figure melting under stage lights. "Principal Wagner," she said, formal now, building her case like Daniel had taught her. "Would you like to explain why your administrative password was used to override 37 grade changes in the past semester, all benefiting students who paid into Christopher's tutoring service? I don't know what your... Or should we discuss the $9,000 deposited into an account under your wife's maiden name, corresponding exactly to the donations from grateful parents whose children suddenly improved their test scores?" The auditorium erupted, parents demanding answers, teachers calling for security, students filming everything on their phones. The ceremony transforming into breaking news in real time. Christopher lunged from his chair. Rage. Overcoming strategy. "You stupid..." He never finished the sentence. Sarah stepped smoothly aside as he charged, using his momentum against him the way Daniel had taught her in their garage self-defense sessions. Christopher hit the podium hard, scattering the carefully arranged Honor Society certificates. "Stop," Principal Wagner commanded. But his authority had evaporated with his exposure. Parents were already on their phones, calling lawyers, demanding meetings, transforming from audience to mob. Sarah returned to the microphone, calm in the eye of the storm she'd created. Every piece of evidence I've collected has been sent to the district superintendent, the state education board, local law enforcement, and 3 major news outlets. Not just about Christopher, but about the entire network of academic fraud he's been operating with his father's protection. She pulled up more files on her phone, each swipe revealing another layer of corruption. Financial records, email chains, photographs of answer keys being exchanged. An entire ecosystem of cheating that had thrived in shadows until she'd dragged it into the light. "Michael Torres," she called out, and in the audience, a sophomore stood up, shaking but determined. "Tell them what Christopher did to you." Michael's voice cracked but carried. He had pictures from my cousin's party, said he'd send them to every college I applied to unless I helped steal test answers. I have the texts, the threats, like a dam breaking. Other students began standing. Ashley Rodriguez, Tyler Turner, names from Christopher's conversations, victims finding courage in numbers, each with a story of blackmail, of grades held hostage, of dreams nearly destroyed by one person's greed. Christopher backed against his father, looking smaller with each accusation, his kingdom crumbling in real time. "They're lying, they're all lying." But Principal Wagner wasn't listening to his son anymore. He was staring at the projection screen, where Jessica had just uploaded the coup de grace security footage of him personally changing grades in the system, accepting envelopes from parents, doctoring transcripts with practiced ease. "How?" he whispered. Sarah almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "Did you really think your IT administrator wasn't watching? That deleting local files meant the evidence was gone? My brother taught me something you never learned: technology remembers everything." The first police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Parents began shepherding their children toward exits, but many lingered, phones out, unwilling to miss the conclusion of this unexpected drama. "You destroyed my brother's memorial photo," Sarah said, speaking directly to Christopher now. "You thought that would break me, but all it did was remind me why he became a cop in the first place, to stop people like you, people who think power means permission to destroy anyone weaker." Christopher's mouth opened and closed like a landed fish. Behind him, his father had sunk into a chair, head in his hands, watching his career disintegrate in real time. Detective Kevin Sullivan entered through the side door, Daniel's former partner whose tired eyes had seen too much, but still held on to hope for justice. Sarah had sent him everything that morning, knowing he'd come when he saw Daniel's little sister had finished what her brother started. "Christopher Wagner," Detective Sullivan announced, his voice cutting through the chaos. "You're under arrest for blackmail, extortion, and criminal conspiracy. You have the right to remain silent." As the handcuffs clicked around Christopher's wrists, he looked at Sarah with naked hatred. "This isn't over. My family has lawyers. So did the drug dealers who killed my brother." Sarah interrupted. "Didn't help them either. See, that's what you never understood about Daniel. About why I couldn't be broken. He didn't just teach me to gather evidence. He taught me to be patient, to build cases that can't be torn down by money or connections." Principal Wagner was escorted out next, his career in education ending with a perp walk through his own auditorium. The school board members in attendance frantically made calls, damage control beginning before the arrestees even reached the police cars. Sarah turned back to the microphone one last time. The audience that remained students, parents, teachers watched her with something new in their expressions. Not pity or suspicion, but respect, and maybe a little fear. "I came here to give a speech about academic excellence," she said. "About integrity, about what it means to earn your achievements honestly. I guess I did that, just not the way anyone expected." She picked up her crumpled speech from the floor, smoothing it carefully. "My brother Daniel died investigating corruption. He believed that institutions meant to protect us schools, police departments. Governments only work when good people refuse to let bad people corrupt them. Today, I honored his memory the only way I knew how, by refusing to let corruption win." Her mother was crying, standing now, pride and grief warring on her face. Around her, other parents began to applaud slowly at first, then building to thunder. Students joined in, especially those who'd suffered in silence, who'd paid Christopher's prices, or lived in fear of becoming his next target. Sarah stepped away from the podium, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation drained away, leaving her feeling hollow and fragile. She'd won. But victory felt less like triumph and more like survival. Jessica Chen met her at the stage stairs, wrapping her in a fierce hug. "Daniel would be so proud," she whispered. "You did what dozens of adults were too scared to do." "I just wanted to give my speech," Sarah said, and surprised herself by laughing a broken sound that might have been crying if she'd had any tears left. "I practiced it for weeks." "Give it at the makeup ceremony," Jessica suggested, "after they hire a new principal. Someone who actually believes in the values they preach." In the parking lot, police cars were pulling away with their cargo of consequences. News vans were already arriving, reporters smelling the kind of story that won awards: corruption in suburban schools. A teenage girl taking down a conspiracy. Justice served hot at a cold ceremony. Sarah found her mother by their car, still parked in the same spot they'd chosen that morning when the biggest worry was whether Sarah's Honor Society sash was straight. "I'm sorry," Sarah started, but her mother pulled her into an embrace that smelled like hospital disinfectant and the lavender perfume she only wore for special occasions. "Don't you dare apologize," her mother said fiercely. "You stood up there alone and told the truth when everyone wanted you to shut up and take it. Just like Daniel would have. Just like I should have when I suspected something was wrong." They stood there in the October sunlight, holding each other while around them the aftermath swirled, interviews being conducted, statements being taken, the machinery of justice grinding into motion. "The house might get egged," Sarah said eventually. "Or worse, Christopher has friends. Then we'll clean eggs, or replace windows, or move if we have to." Her mother pulled back, cupping Sarah's face. "But we won't let them win by being afraid. That's not who we are. That's not who Daniel raised you to be." Later, much later, after the interviews and the statements and the endless questions about how long she'd known and why she'd waited, and did she really think public humiliation was the answer, Sarah sat in her room, holding the recording device that had started it all. Daniel's gift, his last lesson, not just about gathering evidence or building cases, but about the courage to use what you've learned when it matters most. Her phone buzzed with messages. Classmates apologizing for their silence. Teachers admitting they'd suspected but done nothing. Parents thanking her for exposing what their children had been too afraid to report. And death threats, too. from Christopher's remaining loyalists, from those who preferred comfortable corruption to uncomfortable truth. Sarah archived them all, evidence for whatever came next. Because there would be a next. There always was. The system that created Christopher Wagner and protected him until exposure became inevitable, that system didn't die with one arrest. It adapted, evolved, found new hosts and new victims, but now people knew someone was watching, recording, refusing to break. Sarah opened her laptop and began typing, fingers flying over keys with practiced precision. A new document, a new investigation. Because Jessica had shown her something in those network files, something beyond Christopher's petty kingdom. Other schools, other principals, other students suffering in silence. The ceremony they'd never forget was just the beginning. In the weeks that followed, Oakwood High transformed. The makeup ceremony happened with an interim principal who actually checked transcripts. The Honor Society inducted its new members based on real achievements, not purchased grades. Sarah gave her original speech to an audience that listened with different ears, hearing the weight behind words about integrity and excellence. Christopher Wagner pled guilty to avoid trial, his father's career in education ending with a lifetime ban and criminal charges. The investigation spread to 3 other schools, uncovering a network of academic fraud that reached into university admissions offices. Dozens of students had their real grades restored, some losing scholarships they hadn't earned. Others finally receiving recognition they'd been denied. Sarah established the Daniel Miller Memorial Fund with the reward money from the district's whistleblower program. It provided legal support for students facing institutional harassment, technological resources for those documenting abuse, and counseling for those whose academic careers had been derailed by corruption. Michael Torres became her first ally in expanding the investigation. Ashley Rodriguez started a support group. Tyler Turner testified at the district hearings that followed. Together, they built something Christopher had tried to prevent: a community of truth-tellers who refused to be silenced by power. But the best moment came months later, when Sarah was sorting through college acceptance letters at the same kitchen table where she'd planned Christopher's downfall. Her mother was reading one over her shoulder, crying happy tears this time. "Daniel would have loved this," she said, pointing to the journalism scholarship from Northwestern. "Full ride, based entirely on your investigation portfolio." Sarah smiled, thinking of her brother, of recording devices and patient case building, of standing alone on a stage and refusing to break. He knows. Wherever he is, he knows. Because that was the real lesson Daniel had taught her, the one Christopher never understood. Truth didn't need ghosts or guardian angels. It just needed someone brave enough to speak it, patient enough to prove it, and strong enough to survive the consequences. The ceremony they'd never forget had become the story nobody could ignore. And Sarah Miller, the girl who'd said no, who'd recorded everything, who'd stood alone against corruption, had become exactly what her brother always knew she could be. Not just a survivor, not just a witness, a fighter for justice, armed with evidence and unafraid to use it. The recording device still sat on her desk, ready for whatever came next, because there would always be a next Christopher, a next conspiracy, a next ceremony where someone needed to stand up and say enough. And Sarah would be ready, just like Daniel taught her. The day before graduation, Sarah found herself back in the journalism room, packing equipment for the last time. The space felt smaller now, less like a hiding place, and more like a launching pad. She was labeling cameras when footsteps made her look up. An underclassman stood in the doorway, freshman, maybe sophomore, holding a small recording device identical to Sarah's. "You're Sarah Miller," the girl said, not a question. "Yes. I'm Emma Chen, Jessica's niece." The girl stepped inside, nervous but determined. "There's something happening with the athletic department. Recruitment violations, grade fixing for players. My friend tried to report it, but nobody listened," Sarah finished. Emma nodded. "Jessica said you might understand, that you might know what to do." Sarah studied the girl, saw herself from a year ago, holding evidence and feeling alone. She pulled out a chair, gesturing for Emma to sit. "First rule," Sarah said, channeling Daniel's patient teaching voice. "Document everything. Dates, times, names, patterns. Evidence is just data until you connect the dots." Emma pulled out a notebook already full of observations. Sarah smiled. The next generation was learning. Second rule, never work completely alone. Find allies, but choose carefully. The IT department, sympathetic teachers, other students who've been hurt by the system. "And the third rule?" Emma asked, pen poised. Sarah thought of Daniel, of standing on that stage, of Christopher's shock when his victim refused to stay victimized. "The third rule is the hardest," she said. "Be prepared for the moment when you have to stop gathering evidence and start using it, because that moment, that's when you find out who you really are."